Chapter 2. It is important to note that everything I'm going to touch on today is subject to change, because this is Sandbox server after all. It is also important to note that I'm only going to talk about the third iteration, where we have HE balance, or rather HE nerf. I'm not going to talk about artillery HE nor hash rounds, as those are still subject to change and weren't implemented yet under the current system. It is also important to know that even though this is Sandbox, it shows us players and content creators that this is what Wargaming was planning, doing iterations on, and working on, and is now willing enough to show us what they want to do to the game, and it gives a slight idea in what direction World of Tanks might get into. If you didn't watch chapter 1, here is a brief rundown. However, I would appreciate for you and for the knowledge for this video to understand what happened there. There I talk about who I am and why I make such statements, why I think we have a gold spam problem, what HE ammunition is for me personally, and what is currently changed on the Sandbox server. But without further ado, let's jump into the pros, or the good things and bad things, of the current Sandbox server iteration. The good things. What are good on the current Sandbox server iteration? This is probably something I can imagine this is very subjective. Like, I think a lot of people would dislike it, but I personally think it's a very well done change. In my opinion, the low tier gameplay got a lot better. The only thing they really changed is obviously all the things with AP and APCR rounds doing more or rather less damage, and they gave the lower tier tanks from 1 to tier 5 a lot more hit points to work with. Around 80% more on tier 5 and around 300% more on tier 1. Those are very big changes, and I personally think they are very well done, because it allows you as a new player to play a little bit more aggressive, and even though you get punished for doing a stupid move, it is not an instant 2-shot or 3-shot kill. You might now survive up to 4 to 8 rounds before you are finally dispatched. Sure, it can make the learning curve less steep, because you are like, oh, I can do this in higher tiers as well. But, and this is a big but in my opinion, it is important that low tier gameplay keeps new players at bay. If the learning curve is too steep, they will just leave the game. And we shouldn't forget that low tier gameplay at the moment on the live server is very unforgivable. You die in 2 to 3 shots, you don't know anything about the fuel range system, you don't know anything about crews and consumables and most likely equipment. So you sometimes just play against an enemy which has a good crew, etc, which is a topic for a whole other day. And with equipment and etc. So it's already stacked against your favor. But if you feel like you're playing a tank because you can receive some shots without getting immediately destroyed, it could keep you longer at the game and make you a lot more fun. And it's the complete different than what we have in War Thunder. I am currently playing on War Thunder tanks, the French lower tier tanks, like grinding for real this time. And I have to say it's very frustrating, because I feel like my guns do no damage whatsoever. I feel like even though I should have decent armor like the Hotchkiss, everybody still penetrates me immediately and I am a 2-shot. I know this is due to the fact that I only have 2 crew members, but it still is very frustrating. However, it is rewarding when you are able to finish an enemy off. Yet again, in the current iteration, I think the low tier gameplay was the biggest and best addition to the Sandbox server, and I would like to see them in the current live server. Another thing which is good about the Sandbox server changes is how the algorithm calculates the HE module damage. Not the HE damage, just the HE module damage. The HE module damage, I think, in general is a little bit wonky at best, like getting hit in a turret and suddenly burning or something. In general, it's just very unpredictable, and a lot of modules, a lot of crew members just die, and I do understand that this is very frustrating. I sometimes am a HE spammer when I just want to troll. E100 HE only, E4 HE only, Fosh 155. Heck, even for some 279 missions, I had to shoot HE only. But on the other hand, I also know how it is to play a 279 and then just getting shafted by 60 TPs spamming HE into your tracks, into your face, killing modules left and right, dealing 350 damage. So this is why I personally think that the module changes are good, but the rest I want to touch on in now. The problems of the current Sandbox server iteration. The biggest problem, in my opinion, about World of Tanks in general, and this is something which is completely left outdoors right now on the current Sandbox server, is that we are missing weak spots on most tanks. At the moment, the Sandbox server, to me personally, just feels like Wargaming just made an Excel sheet for their ini files where they just said, put on a flat 20% buff to AP and AP and hit points. It just feels so cheap, in my opinion. Because the underlying issue, and this is what I talked about in chapter 1 of this video series, is that we do not have weak spots. Have a look at the tanks like the IS-7. The IS-7 turret has no weak spot whatsoever. Chieftain, it only has a small cupola, which is very hard to hit. A 430U has 300mm to 280mm of active armor on his cupola while standing on flat ground. Those are not weak spots. Type 5 Heavy, its cupola, 280mm plus. 279, non-weak spots whatsoever in the lower plate. Just one cupola which is a little bit bigger than the other one, which is 210mm thick. Super Conqueror, which basically can only be penetrated by APCR rounds underneath the gun because the cupola is off limits because of ricocheting angles. The removal of weak spots in general is just terrifying to see, and it's just so annoying. We used to have machine gun port weak spots. It used to be more skill based to hide all of your weak spots, and this is also why I personally enjoyed playing the Mauerbrecher. However, I have to say, as an example of the Mauerbrecher on live server, it is annoying that tier 9, tier 8 and tier 10 enemies have no issues whatsoever to penetrate your turret frontally. Not through the cupola, that is totally fine, but through the turret face. Because it just feels like I'm playing well, I'm hiding 3 to 4 of my weak spots, yet I still get just shafted through by a double press on the button. This is, in my opinion, one of the issues which definitely did not got touched on. Another thing which is kind of stupid and something which actually very much annoyed me during testing is I had an enemy Russian player which was quite underneath my skill level when I looked up his stats. I know my stats whore. And he was playing the mouse and I was playing the E100 because I'm still waiting for an E100 buff, and Wargaming said they have to wait because they think the E100 will get a lot stronger with the Sandbox server changes. This is why I decided to play the E100. The issue is the mouse has far less positions to be penetrated with premium rounds than I am. Because let's face it, I am not able to penetrate him reliably with AP. He could in theory if he wouldn't be a wanker. But he was a wanker, he pressed the double 2 key, and after looking up the difference in HP, it just turned out that he needed 1 shot more to kill me than on the current live server. This is like 10 seconds longer to kill me. So even though this Sandbox server's whole thing to change is that gold ammunition spam is not that strong anymore, it just feels even stronger because as soon as you have good to great armor with rarely to no weak spots, you get even stronger and you can still spam your double 2 key without getting a real disadvantage. Yes, again, you lose around 22% time on killing an enemy, but who cares when you still penetrate easily with no drawbacks whatsoever. Another thing which is just straight up weird to me is with the increase of all standard rounds getting more alpha, the RNG increased on them. Or not really the RNG, but the discrepancy or the difference between low and high rolls got much more. So for example, a normal E100 round can do around between 593 to up to 938 damage. So this is around 400-ish, 450-ish damage difference. And in the lives on the Sandbox server, this jumped up to around 500, if I'm not mistaken. Because now, because we have already a higher standpoint, the RNG gets wider. And this is just, do we really need more RNG in that sense? Do we need more different damage rolls? In the case of the E100, you can roll between 700 to up to 1163, which is almost enough to one-shot a wheeled tank in the Sandbox server, the tier 8 Lynx one. It just feels so weird to me that they went with this way, even though in the first iteration they made a premium rounds having less damage. Yeah. In general, right now, the whole Sandbox server, and I don't think that this needs rocket science to understand, is that tanks with good armor, which at the moment are a lot and at the moment are already considered strong, again, Chieftain for 30U, Super Conqueror, even 277 here and there, WZ1115A, all those tanks are getting a very big buff because they can still shoot premium rounds at you while bouncing your premium rounds without any issue. They just need one shot longer to finish you off. But they don't even need to shoot premium rounds. They can make it the same as always when they hit your weak spots. Because when you play a tank, like, it just feels like such a disadvantage to play a tank with weak spots. Play the Foch B, for example. You're a joke. Play the E5. You are a goddamn joke. Play the E100. Either they aim or they just don't care. Badger don't care and they press a dab or dab the 2 key and they shoot through your turret and just take the 20% DPM loss. Badger doesn't care. And another thing is that the HE change. The HE change is absolutely garbage in my opinion. And let me explain why again. For me, HE is a high risk, high reward type of ammunition. If I am not able to penetrate somebody with HE, I should do far less damage, because that's the point in my opinion. However, if I am thinking about, for example, I am now going to sneak up on a Chieftain, a Super Conqueror, an E5, an E3, an E4, or even a Stage 2 in a Tier 10 gameplay. So SU 140 PM, Scorpion G, Charioteer, all those lightly armored vehicles. I usually always go through my head, can I load HE to penetrate them and do more damage, to cripple them with a penetrating shot. This is always something which goes through me or through my head, and I like that I can decide, well, with one shot of HE I could finish him off, which means he can't shoot me back and I survive the encounter. If I bounce, however, I will need 2 more AP shots, or I can go safe and just take 2 AP shots and hope he whiffs his shot or is not fast enough to turn onto me. Those are things which constantly go through my head when I'm playing World of Tanks and when I get into situations where HE is a viable option. This is something I want to see in World of Tanks, to think, should I use AP? Should I use APCR? Should I use Heat? Should I even use APHE if Wargaming actually wants to take a step further and implement a new ammunition type? Or should I keep on using HE? This is really good on the current live server, but the Sandbox server completely abolished that. You know, it is very, very Very bad, knowing that with the current HE changes, it gave an indirect buff to every lightly armored vehicle. So, if you think that EBRs are annoying, well, you still know that they can be screwed over by HE, especially the tier 8 vehicle. What about the stage 2, which is a huge sore thumb for some people because of its devastating hash? Well, if he gets spotted, I love to shoot at it, because I press the free key and then just shit into his shit barn head. It's so weak, and it really rewards me for using HE, because not only am I going to destroy a lot of his modules, I'm also going to do a lot of damage in general. Usually HE is an increase of 20% in the damage, and this is just, in my opinion, a good thinking. Low penetration, high damage, if you penetrate, obviously. Sure, you can get trolled while hitting the gun, but then again, this is what we are used to. It is frustrating, yes, but the same thing can happen to him. In the background, you saw probably the clip right now where I YOLO'd the E100. It was just to make a statement, just to show how stupid this actually is. To think that you can't do any damage anymore with HE. It just frustrates me, because it basically destroys ammunition types. It just gives you the option between normal rounds and premium rounds or special rounds. That's it. HE, Badger doesn't care. There is no point in them whatsoever. And again, lightly armored vehicles, stage 2, Waffenträger, RT even, Su-130 PM, all those tanks got a shadow buff, or an indirect buff, because now they can more effectively trade their HP, because they don't have to fear to get slapped into their face by 20% more damage. So, this was chapter 2. This was the good things and the bad things about the current Sandbox server. Let me know in the comment section below what you think, and feel free to leave a sub, because in the next and last chapter I'm going to propose a change I would like to see, like a RagingRaptor ammunition rebalancing. Obviously, this will be incredible subjective, because it is my personal opinion. It's very opinionated, and I like, again, it could be that some people like it could be that some people dislike it. Obviously, I will be biased and say I like it because I came up with it. But then again, in my opinion, it will be a lot better what we have right now, because I do think that HE, yes, it should do less damage when not penetrating, but completely butchering HE and not allowing it to do any damage at all, not being able to penetrate, is just stupid and takes away one part of why World of Tanks is tactical and also skill based. My name is RagingRaptor, thank you so much for your attention.